Welcome to the Restricted Handling Daily Intel Brief. This is what's been going on in China in the past 24 hours. The biggest story today is that Beijing is expanding pressure around Taiwan in ways that blur the line between diplomacy, law enforcement, intelligence activity, and military competition. The key development is not one single operation. It is the growing number of fronts where China is trying to shape the environment around Taiwan and the wider Indo-Pacific. An update on the Taiwan picture. Beijing's pressure campaign is increasingly extending beyond the Taiwan Strait itself and into the surrounding waters and neighboring countries' strategic calculations. The Philippines is the latest example. Philippine Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro pushed back strongly against claims from Chinese scholars that the Batanes island chain belongs to China. The comments came after a June 30th symposium where Chinese academics argued that Batanes was a natural extension of Taiwan and therefore connected to China. Now, Beijing has not officially adopted that position, but Manila is looking at why those comments matter. Batanes is not just a remote group of islands. It sits in the Luzon Strait, roughly 100 miles south of Taiwan, in one of the most strategically important maritime areas in the region. For the Philippines, the concern is that China's approach often begins with narratives before actions. Claims, legal arguments, and historical interpretations can eventually become the foundation for broader political and maritime pressure. Teodoro described the claims as baseless and said they needed to be challenged. His broader message was that the Philippines sees itself on the front line of a larger contest over whether regional countries can maintain control over their own waters and decisions. That is why Manila is increasingly building relationships beyond Washington. The Philippines is strengthening defense ties with Japan, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and other partners while trying to modernize its own military. But there is a difficult balancing act here. The Philippines still has significant economic ties with China. Beijing remains an important trading partner, and many countries in Southeast Asia face the same dilemma. How do you push back against Chinese pressure without creating economic vulnerabilities of your own? That challenge is playing out across the region. Taiwan is also trying to make China's activities more visible internationally. This week, Taipei brought foreign lawmakers aboard a Taiwan Coast Guard ship for a patrol near Kinmen, the Taiwan-controlled island group located just off China's coast. The delegation included lawmakers from the United Kingdom, Ukraine, the Czech Republic, India, and New Zealand. The goal was simple: put foreign politicians on the water, show them the geography, and demonstrate what Taiwan says is the daily pressure created by Chinese activity. British lawmaker Tom Tugendhat said the visit was about defending the international rules-based order. Ukrainian lawmaker Yulia Surko drew a comparison to Ukraine, arguing that one of the biggest lessons from Russia's invasion was that countries need to prepare before a crisis begins. That message is clearly resonating in Taipei. Taiwan continues to focus on deterrence and resilience, believing that preventing conflict requires demonstrating the ability and willingness to withstand pressure. Meanwhile, China continues using what has become its familiar gray zone playbook around Taiwan. Taiwan reported that between July 8th and July 9th, Chinese aircraft, naval vessels, and government ships were operating around the island. 28 Chinese aircraft sorties were detected, including aircraft crossing the median line of the Taiwan Strait and entering Taiwan's air defense identification zone. The important point is not simply the number of aircraft or ships. The larger issue is repetition. China has increasingly relied on actions that do not cross the threshold of war, but gradually create a new normal. Coast Guard patrols, maritime enforcement operations, military flights, and political messaging all serve the same purpose: increasing pressure while forcing Taiwan to constantly respond. At the same time, Beijing is continuing to signal its growing strategic military capabilities. The United States criticized China after its July 6 submarine-launched ballistic missile test, arguing that Beijing provided only limited advance notice and insufficient details about the launch. China responded by calling the criticism hypocritical and describing the test as routine training. But the concern in Washington is not just about one missile launch. It is about China's broader nuclear modernization effort. For decades, China maintained a much smaller nuclear force compared with the United States and Russia. That gap is shrinking. Beijing is investing heavily in expanding its nuclear arsenal, improving its submarine-based capabilities, and making sure it has a more credible second strike capability. The suspected involvement of the JL-3 submarine-launched ballistic missile is significant because systems like this complicate U.S. planning. A more capable Chinese nuclear submarine force makes it harder for any opponent to assume it could neutralize China's retaliatory capability during a crisis. Beyond military issues, the U.S.-China competition continues moving deeper into technology. Washington is preparing new restrictions on Chinese vehicles entering the U.S. market, focusing on concerns surrounding connected vehicle technology and data collection. Modern cars are increasingly sophisticated digital platforms, and policymakers are worried about the possibility of sensitive information flowing back to China. The debate reflects a much larger shift. Industries that once looked purely commercial are now being treated as national security issues. China is facing its own technology challenge, especially in artificial intelligence. Reports indicate Beijing may allow major Chinese AI companies, including Alibaba, ByteDance, and DeepSeek, to purchase limited quantities of NVIDIA H200 chips. The interesting part is the tension behind that decision. China wants to build a self-sufficient technology ecosystem, but its companies still need access to some of the world's most advanced computing hardware. It is a difficult position for Beijing. Cutting dependence on foreign technology is a major strategic priority, but limiting access to the best available tools can slow progress. That same competition is playing out in cyberspace. Taiwanese authorities recently charged two businessmen accused of helping Chinese-linked cyber operators obtain messaging accounts that were then used to impersonate journalists. Investigators allege those accounts helped attackers build trust with targets before deploying malware disguised as secure communications software. The reported targets included politicians, academics, journalists, and civil society organizations. This is a good example of how modern espionage increasingly combines old-fashioned human deception with advanced cyber capabilities. The goal is still the same as it has always been: get someone to open the door. The difference is that today, the door is digital. Finally, China and Russia continue expanding military cooperation. During the Joint Sea 2026 naval exercise in Qingdao, Chinese and Russian sailors exchanged visits aboard each other's warships, including China's Type 052D destroyer Kaifeng and Russia's Varyag missile cruiser. The exercise itself is part of a long-running pattern of naval cooperation between Beijing and Moscow. The larger message is political. Both governments want to demonstrate that their relationship extends beyond trade and diplomacy into practical military coordination. Thanks for listening. If this episode was useful, take a second to leave a review or drop a comment. It makes a real difference in getting this in front of the right audience. We also publish a daily intel brief on Substack at restrictedhandling.substack.com with deeper coverage on Russia, China, Iran, the Middle East, and the DPRK. Have a great rest of your day.